So if you had to give guidance about where to put all these fancy read listeners in your activity, what would you say?
That's a great question, and I'm not entirely sure.
It was mostly rhetorical. I've actually done a little reading on this one. Here's what I found.
Here's our friendly Android lifecycle. Where we create and destroy our Firebase listeners is a typical developer trade-off, memory versus network traffic in this case. Remember that every time you recreate a listener, it pings the database. And listeners are also something that can be kept around for a long time, in which case they leave a memory footprint. So there's some general rules of thumb that you should go by when you're actually creating and destroying your listeners. If you're going to come back to the activity a few times, you should make your listeners in onCreate and get rid of them in onDestroy. This is because your activity will be going in and out of the visible lifecycle, and therefore onStart and onStop or onResume and onPause will get called many times as your activity lives. If you put your listeners in any of these methods, you'll be generating unwanted network activity by continually recreating listeners. If the activity is likely to be a one-off activity, you should consider making your listeners in onStart and cleaning them up in onStop. So you might be wondering what I mean by a one-off activity. Well, some sort of activity that the user is unlikely to return to, such as a login screen. A user will probably log in once and then sort of use the app for a while. They might even minimize the app and do other things and come back to the app, all without visiting the login screen again. Now, why not just put these in onCreate and onDestroy? Well, onStop will be fired, sometimes significantly earlier than onDestroy will. And because of that, you'll end up freeing up the memory sooner. With all of that said, the engineers at Firebase did build listeners to be relatively lightweight. But just like cleaning up your listeners, this is another best practice to keep your app running smoothly.